Making a terrarium might look tricky, but it's actually really simple. In this video, I'm going to create a living ecosystem inside this glass jar and talk you through every step of the process in an easy to understand, beginner friendly way. Now let's waste no time and get straight into the build. The first step to creating the terrarium is the drainage layer. For this, I'm going to use some fine leaker, but a great alternative is some cheap pea gravel. The drainage layer is a layer of rocks or stones that sit right at the base of the terrarium with the purpose of collecting excess water that seeps through the substrate. By having the water collect at the base of the terrarium opposed to the substrate, it stops the roots sitting in stagnant soil. With the leaker inside, I'm using the back of my hand to flatten it out to make sure there's no high or low spots. I've probably made it a bit deeper than necessary, but it's better than being too shallow. This here is some window screen mesh and it's going to act as a substrate barrier. I'm placing the jar on top and then roughly cutting it to size. As the name suggests, the purpose of this is to stop the substrate from getting down into the drainage. The small holes will allow water to freely pass through whilst keeping the substrate in place. Talking about the substrate, that's the next layer to go inside. This is arguably the most important layer of the terrarium, so it's important to get it right and use a quality substrate mix. Here's the mix I've used for quite literally thousands of terrariums. If you want to see a more detailed video on how to make it, there'll be a link on screen now as well as in the description. If you don't want to make your own mix, don't worry, as most pre-made mixes will work just fine. After pouring in a generous amount, I'm gently compacting it down with the back of my hand. As you can see, I've sloped it up towards the back of the terrarium. This will help create some height and increase the sense of depth. Next, it's time to start work on the hardscape. This is essentially what will define the terrarium's layout and will help bring the most amount of character. As the jar is quite tall, I really want to do my best to utilise the space. I think these two pieces of wood fit perfectly and create a simple but effective layout. The next step is where the terrarium really starts to come to life. This is cushion moss and it's an ideal choice for beginners. It's easy to grow and keeps its lush green colour with very little maintenance required. Before planting, I'm tearing it into small chunks and then using some scissors to chop off the base. I can then take this small patch and gently press it down onto the substrate. Be sure to save the bottom cutting of moss as it's got plenty of uses. You can use it as a substitute for sphagnum moss inside the substrate mix. Alternatively, you can actually regrow it into a lush green mossy carpet. Simply snip it up into tons of pieces, place it in a tub and leave it to grow. I like to plant the moss in small patches at a time and gradually fill out the space piece by piece. Whilst I finish up planting the moss, let me quickly tell you about my terrarium making ebook. It's absolutely packed with practical advice and simple steps to help you make your own terrarium from scratch. If you're a beginner or have never made a terrarium before, it will definitely get you started in the right direction. There'll be a link in the description and the pinned comment in case you're interested. With all the moss planted, the terrarium is really starting to take shape. If you really wanted to, you can leave it as it is as a moss-only terrarium, but I think this scape will look a lot better with the addition of some plants. Here I've got a range of different species that all thrive in terrarium conditions. When it comes to choosing plants for your terrariums, you can't just pick any old plant as they need to be suited to the high humidity environment of a terrarium. Tropical plants are usually the way to go as they originate from parts of the world where humidity and temperature is naturally high. The first plant that I'm going to add is this peperomia. The first step is taking it out the pot and removing as much of the soil as I can. Next, I'm going to choose a place to plant it and poke a hole through the moss down into the substrate. I can then simply place the roots inside and compress the moss and substrate around it. Next to go in is going to be some Photonia. This is probably the best plant to use if you're a beginner. It comes in a variety of different colours, stays small, and it's super easy to grow. Before planting, I'm trimming off any damaged leaves or ones that I think are slightly too big. I'm going to plant another on the right side to help balance the one on the left. The next plant that I'm going to add is this oak leaf creeping fig. It's a miniature leafed plant with climbing and trailing tendencies. With this in mind, I'm planting it in areas where it can climb up the hardscape. I'm really excited to see this scape once the plant has climbed and wrapped itself around the wood. I feel like the large leaves of the peperomia are taking up too much space at the front of the scape, so I'm going to move it towards the back. This then frees up some space at the front for this smaller species of peperomia. The last plants that I'm going to add is these jewel orchids. Their leaves are absolutely stunning, and with some time they'll add some nice height to the background of the terrarium. With the planting done, I really think this terrarium is looking great, and I think everything ties together really nicely. It might look complete, but there's still some very important finishing touches that are going to ensure its long-term success. The first of these is to add some water to the ecosystem. Watering a terrarium is one of the most important steps, but it's also where a lot of beginners go wrong. Too much water can throw off the balance and cause some serious problems such as root rot. Every terrarium is different, but I like to water mine until the substrate is damp but not wet or soggy. The best way to achieve this is to spread the watering process out over a few days. I'll add a small amount of water today and then check how it looks tomorrow. If it's still looking dry, I'll add some more and then check it again on day 3. Spreading this process out gives the substrate time to absorb the water it needs without the threat of overwatering. Next, I'm adding some tiny bugs called springtails. They'll spend the majority of their time in the moss and substrate and help keep the ecosystem clean by eating things like mold and decaying matter. With the terrarium complete, we need to talk about lighting. If you wanted, you can place the terrarium under a nice display light and have it receive about 12 hours of light a day. Alternatively, and the method that I'm going to use for this build, is to place the terrarium in a bright spot in indirect sunlight. This spot in the porch is nice and bright throughout the day but receives no direct sunlight, which is perfect. I really can't stress enough how important it is not to keep the terrarium in direct sun. The intensified light and heat will simply cook everything inside. I'm really pleased with how this terrarium came together, and hopefully it's inspired you to make one of your own. If you liked this video, why not check out this one next, as I think you might enjoy it too.